The Fall of New Eden. Admiral Kira Patel stood at the observation deck of New Eden's Central Command, watching the sunset paint the colony's biodomes in shades of amber and gold. 20 years of human ingenuity had transformed this hostile world into humanity's greatest achievement, a thriving metropolis of 10 million souls. The same sunset that filled her with pride would be their last. "Admiral, they're here." Commander Reza Nazari's voice cracked as he delivered the report. "The Void Dancers have breached the outer defense grid." Kira's fingers tightened on the railing as she watched the first of the alien ships emerge from hyperspace, massive, crystalline structures that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They had appeared 3 months ago, systematically destroying Earth's outer colonies. New Eden was humanity's last major outpost. "Status of Project Chrysalis?" she asked, her voice steady despite the klaxons blaring through the command center. "Dr. Yuki Tanaka reports the chambers are ready. Capacity for 15,000. Reza's tablet displayed the latest numbers. "But Admiral, the genetic modification process, it's still experimental. We don't know what long-term effects the adaptive sequences might have. Better unknown effects than certain death." Kira turned to face the command center's staff, their young faces illuminated by emergency lighting. "Begin evacuation protocols. Priority to scientific personnel, genetic diversity candidates, and essential military staff." The next 12 hours became a blur of organized chaos. The Void Dancers' attack was unlike anything they had anticipated. Instead of conventional weapons, the aliens released clouds of iridescent particles that transformed matter at the molecular level. Entire sections of the colony crystallized, trapping people in mid-motion like insects in amber. In the underground facility designated as Chrysalis Base, Dr. Tanaka worked frantically to prepare the cryo chambers. Each subject received injections of the experimental genetic modifiers, sequences designed to enhance human adaptability during long-term space travel. Now they would serve a different purpose. "The modification process is affecting the subjects differently than our models predicted," Yuki reported, showing Kira the latest data. "The genetic changes are more aggressive, more purposeful somehow. It's as if the sequences are responding to the immediate threat." Above them, the sounds of battle grew louder. The colony's defenders fought valiantly, but their weapons seemed to pass through the Void Dancers harmlessly. The aliens' crystalline ships had landed, disgorging ground forces that moved like liquid shadow. "Admiral." Lieutenant Wei broke into the lab, his armor scored with crystalline growths. "They've breached the upper levels. The atmospheric processors are failing. We have minutes, maybe less." Kira made her decision. "Seal the facility. Begin final sequence for all occupied chambers." She turned to Yuki. "Doctor, how many?" 12,843. Yuki replied, initiating the cryogenic process. "All chambers are showing green. The genetic modifications are stabilizing." Through the facility's cameras, they watched as the crystallization effect spread through the colony's streets. Buildings, vehicles, and people frozen in eternal stillness. The Void Dancers moved among their works like artists admiring their gallery. "Admiral, you need to take the last chamber," Reza insisted, but Kira shook her head. "Someone needs to ensure the facility goes dark. Complete shutdown, no emissions they can trace." She checked her tablet one last time, transmitting the final data packet to Earth through their quantum entanglement array. "Humanity survives in these chambers. They'll need leaders when they wake." Reza understood. He and Yuki took their places in the final chambers as Kira initiated the shutdown sequence. The facility's lights dimmed one by one, life support systems powered down to minimal levels, and the quantum shields activated, hiding them from the alien sensors. In the last moments before the crystal wave reached her, Kira recorded a final message. "To those who wake, remember that humanity's greatest strength has always been its ability to adapt, to survive, to rise from the ashes of devastation. The Void Dancers believe they have won, but they don't understand what we have become. Sleep well, my children. When you wake, You will be more than we ever were. The crystallization effect reached the command console. Admiral Kira Puttel stood straight, her uniform immaculate, as the wave washed over her. In the chambers below, 12,000 souls slept, their bodies already beginning to change in ways their creators never anticipated. The fall of New Eden marked the end of one chapter of human history. But within the sleeping chambers, the next chapter was already being written. Echoes in the dark. The crystal forests of New Eden glittered under the pale light of 3 moons. Rin Hayashi moved silently through the alien landscape, her adaptive camouflage suit blending with the crystalline structures that had once been buildings. 150 years had passed since the fall, but the void dancers still patrolled these ruins, drawn to them like moths to flame. Movement at Sector 7, whispered Kai, her spotter, through the neural link. 2 dancers, moving in that spiraling pattern they use when they're searching. Rin pressed herself against a crystal formation, her heart steadied despite the proximity of the aliens. The void dancers hadn't changed in the century and a half since they'd claimed this world. They still appeared as translucent, humanoid shapes that rippled like liquid glass. What had changed was humanity's understanding of them. Package is still showing active, Kai reported. Energy signature matches the old records. Whatever's down there, it's still drawing power from somewhere. The discovery had come 3 weeks ago, when their deep scanning array had detected an anomaly beneath the crystal forest, a pocket of void space that shouldn't exist. The descendants of those who'd escaped the initial crystallization had spent generations hiding in the deep caverns, building their strength, studying their enemy. Now they might have found something that could change everything. Dancers are moving away, Kai updated. You've got a clear path to the access point. Rin moved forward, her boots making no sound on the crystalline ground. The scanner in her augmented vision highlighted structural weaknesses in the formations, places where the alien transformation hadn't fully penetrated. The resistance had learned to use these imperfections to their advantage. The access point turned out to be an old maintenance shaft, its entrance partially obscured by crystal growth. Rin's nanites went to work, dissolving just enough of the crystal to allow her passage. The shaft plunged deep into darkness, untouched by the transformation that had claimed the surface. I'm picking up atmosphere down there, Rin reported, checking her instruments. Old air, but breathable. And something else. Power readings are getting stronger. She descended for what seemed like hours, though her chronometer showed only 40 minutes had passed. The shaft opened into a vast chamber that her lights couldn't fully illuminate, but what she could see made her breath catch. Kai, are you seeing this? By the stars, her spotter breathed. Those are cryo chambers, hundreds of them. Thousands. Rows upon rows of sleek metal pods filled the chamber, each one showing active status lights. Rin approached the nearest control panel, brushing away decades of dust. The interface sprang to life at her touch, displaying information in an old Earth standard format. Project Chrysalis, she read aloud. These people, they're from before the fall. They've been here the whole time, sleeping. A sound echoed through the chamber, the distinct crystalline chime of void dancers communicating. Rin's camo suit adjusted instantly, but she knew it wouldn't fool them for long at close range. Multiple dancers entering the shaft, Kai warned. They must have detected the power surge from the interface activation. You need to move now. But Rin stood her ground, her mind racing. The Resistance had developed weapons that could harm the void dancers, but they'd never had enough people to mount a real offensive. Now, looking at these thousands of preserved humans, she understood why this facility had been hidden so carefully. Kai, send the recovery team. Full complement, heavy equipment, and get me General Santos. You can't be serious. Those pods are decades old. We don't know if anyone in them is still viable. Rin's fingers flew over the interface, absorbing the information. According to these logs, they're not just survivors. They were modified, enhanced somehow. The scientist in charge, Dr. Tanaka, She logged something about genetic adaptations becoming more aggressive than expected. The crystalline chimes grew closer. Rin pulled out her pulse rifle, the weapon humming as it charged. The Resistance had learned that high-frequency energy bursts could disrupt the Void Dancer's form temporarily, not enough to kill them, but enough to hurt them. "Recovery team is en route," Kai reported. 6 minutes out. "But Rin, you've got maybe 2 minutes before those dancers reach you." Rin smiled grimly, taking up position behind a cluster of pods. "Then I better make those minutes count. These people are our ancestors, Kai. They're the missing piece we've been looking for, and I'm not letting the dancers have them." The first alien emerged from the shaft like flowing mercury, its crystalline form catching and refracting Rin's lights. She waited until it was fully in the chamber before taking her shot. The pulse rifle's burst caught the dancer in what passed for its center mass, causing its form to shatter into thousands of glittering shards. The pieces were already flowing back together as the second dancer emerged, but Rin had made her point. Humanity had learned to fight back. And now, with the discovery of Project Chrysalis, they were about to learn how to win. More dancers poured into the chamber, their chimes rising to a crescendo that made the crystal formations resonate. Rin fired again and again, each shot carefully placed to cause maximum disruption. She just needed to hold them off long enough for the recovery team to arrive. 1 minute, Kai counted down. "Rin, the pod's closest to you. I'm reading biological activity. Strong readings. Whatever's in those chambers, it's responding to the situation." Rin risked a glance at the nearest pod's display. The occupants' vital signs were elevated, genetic markers shifting in patterns she didn't understand. Something was happening. Something that had been set in motion 150 years ago. The recovery team's breach charges detonated above, creating new access points to the chamber. As rappel lines dropped from the ceiling and resistance fighters descended into the chaos, Rin allowed herself a moment of hope. They had found more than just survivors from the past. They had found the future. Awakening warriors. The awakening of Subject Zero changed everything. Director Isamu Khan watched through reinforced glass as the first of the Cryo chamber occupants took his first breath in over a century. The man was Colonel Viktor Rostov, former head of New Eden's Special Operations, and his revival was nothing like they had expected. "These readings can't be right," Lieutenant Jenna Patel muttered, checking her instruments for the third time. "His cellular structure is shifting." Victor's body gleamed with a subtle iridescence, almost like the crystalline structures of the Void Dancers, but organic, alive. As he opened his eyes, everyone in the observation room gasped. They were shot through with threads of luminescent silver. "I remember." Victor's voice was rough from disuse, but steady. "Admiral Patel, the modification sequence, it worked better than we hoped." Isamu stepped closer to the glass. "Colonel Rostov, I'm Director Khan. You've been in cryo sleep for 150 years. The world you knew is gone." "Not gone," Victor corrected, examining his changed flesh with clinical interest. "Transformed, just like us." He stood, movements fluid despite his long hibernation. The genetic modifications weren't just about survival in cryo sleep. Dr. Tanaka, she understood what we were facing. She designed the sequences to adapt, to evolve. In the next chamber, the medical team was preparing to revive Dr. Tanaka herself. The recovery team had prioritized key personnel, those whose expertise would be most valuable. As her pod opened, the same iridescent transformation rippled across her skin. Over the next 48 hours, they revived 100 more. Each awakened person showed the same changes. The silvery eyes, the subtle glow beneath their skin, and most importantly, abilities that defied explanation. The Void Dancers remake worlds by manipulating matter at its fundamental level, Dr. Tanaka explained during the first strategy session. She held up her hand, and the metal table beneath it began to ripple like water. "We've evolved to do the same." Rin Hayashi, who had discovered the facility, watched in amazement as Victor demonstrated their new capabilities. He touched a crystal formation, and it crumbled to dust. The modifications adapted to give us control over molecular structures, he explained. We can counter their crystallization effect, maybe even reverse it. But it was Lieutenant Santos who made the most startling discovery. During a Void Dancer attack on the facility, she found she could see through their crystalline forms, perceive the energy patterns that made up their consciousness. They're not just reshaping matter, she reported. They're trying to reshape reality itself. Our evolution is a direct response to their fundamental nature. The resistance leadership gathered in the war room, watching footage of the awakened ancestors training with their new abilities. We're no longer just fighting for survival, Isamu declared. For the first time, we can fight back on equal terms. Dr. Tanaka's voice cut through the excited chatter. There's more. The genetic modifications are communicable. Through close proximity, we can trigger similar changes in our descendants. We can share our evolution. The implications stunned the room into silence. Humanity had a weapon that could transform their entire species, give them the power to reclaim their world. But the ethical implications were staggering. It has to be voluntary, Victor insisted, his silver eyes intense. We're not like them. We won't force this change on anyone. The debate raged for hours, but in the end, the decision was made. The resistance fighters would be given the choice to undergo the transformation. Those who accepted would form the core of a new fighting force, one capable of meeting the Void Dancers on their own terms. As the first volunteers stepped forward, Rin among them, Dr. Tanaka made one final revelation. The modifications haven't stopped evolving. Each generation of changes is stronger, more refined. We're becoming something new, something that might transcend both human and dancer. Outside the facility, the crystal forests of New Eden gleamed under the starlight. But now, for the first time in 150 years, they seemed less like monuments to humanity's defeat and more like chrysalises waiting for the emergence of something extraordinary. The war was about to enter a new phase, and humanity had finally found its answer to the Void Dancer's power. They would fight crystal with crystal, transformation with transformation. The awakened ancestors would lead the way, teaching their descendants to harness their new evolution. As Victor watched the first group of volunteers begin their transformation, he remembered Admiral Patel's last words. When you wake, you will be more than we ever were. She couldn't have known how prophetic those words would become. The rising storm. The first major offensive against the Void Dancers began at dawn. Rin Hayashi, her body now shimmering with the same iridescent glow as the awakened ancestors, led the vanguard. 3 months of transformation and training had prepared them for this moment. Beside her, Colonel Victor Rostov's eyes blazed silver as he surveyed the crystalline wasteland that had once been New Eden's capital. Remember, his voice echoed through their neural network, we're not just fighting for victory. We're fighting for restoration. He raised his hand, and the transformed soldiers watched in awe as the crystal formations around them began to vibrate in response to his will. The Void Dancers sensed the attack coming. Their crystalline forms flowed together, merging into towering structures that pulsed with alien energy. But this time, humanity was ready. Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the neural link. The resonance patterns are holding. Their molecular manipulation can't override our own anymore. Push forward. The battle that followed defied conventional physics. The transformed humans moved like living mercury, their bodies flowing through the crystal forest with impossible grace. When the Void Dancers launched their crystallization wave, the defenders didn't retreat. Instead, they absorbed the energy, redirected it, turned the aliens' own power against them. Lieutenant Santos led her squad through what had once been the city center. Where the dancers' crystal structures touched their skin, they didn't freeze. They dissolved, returning to their base elements. They never imagined, she thought through the link, that their attempt to remake us would give us the power to unmake them. But the Void Dancers weren't easily defeated. As their initial attacks failed, they changed tactics. The crystal forests began to sing, emanating frequencies that had once paralyzed human nervous systems. Now, the transformed soldiers felt the vibrations and matched them, creating counterharmonies that shattered the alien constructs. In the command center, Director Khan watched through the tactical displays as humanity pushed back against their invaders for the first time in 150 years. "They're retreating from the southern quadrant," he reported. "The crystallization is actually reversing." Dr. Tanaka's latest discovery had proven crucial. The genetic modifications hadn't just given them control over matter, they had granted humanity the ability to restore what the Void Dancers had transformed. Everywhere the transformed soldiers touched, crystal returned to concrete, metal, and living matter. Rin found herself at the forefront of the advance, her squad pressing into the heart of Dancer territory. The aliens' confusion was palpable. For generations, they had treated Earth's survivors as pests, barely worth noticing. Now, they faced an enemy that could match and counter their every move. "They're trying to reach their ships," Victor observed through the link. "Don't let them escape. If they warn their homeworld about what we've become." "They're trying to reach their ships," Victor observed through the link. "Don't let them escape. If they warn their homeworld about what we've become." The battle reached its crescendo as the transformed humans surrounded the Dancers' landing zone. The alien ships, massive crystalline structures that had once seemed invincible, now looked fragile against the power of humanity's evolution. Rin raised her hands, feeling the molecular bonds around her respond to her will. Across the battlefield, hundreds of transformed soldiers did the same. The air itself seemed to vibrate as they exerted their combined power. The Void Dancers' ships began to crack, their perfect crystalline forms developing fractures that spread like lightning. The aliens tried to merge with their vessels, to protect them with their own substance, but it was too late. With a sound like 1,000 breaking mirrors, the ships shattered. The Dancers trapped inside dissolved into showers of inert crystal dust. Those that remained free turned on their attackers in desperate fury. But each assault was met with equal force and greater determination. As the sun set on the battlefield, the last Void Dancer fell. The crystal forests that had dominated the landscape for generations were retreating, replaced by patches of natural ground. In the distance, the first green shoots were already pushing through the restored soil. Victor stood at the edge of the reclaimed territory, his silver eyes reflecting the twilight. "This is only the beginning," he said to the gathered soldiers. "There will be more Dancers coming. But now we know we can fight them. Now we know we can win." Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the neural network, filled with wonder. "The transformations are still progressing. Each victory, each use of our abilities, pushes our evolution further. We're becoming something they never anticipated, a species that can adapt as quickly as they can attack." In the command center, Director Khan began planning the next phase of the war. The victory at New Eden would send a message across the galaxy. Humanity wasn't just surviving anymore. They were rising, transformed but unbroken, ready to reclaim everything they had lost. As night fell, Ren walked through the partially restored city, watching crystal structures dissolve into their original forms with each step she took. The war wasn't over, but for the first time in 150 years, the future held more promise than fear. Dawn of Reclamation. 3 years after the Battle of New Eden, Earth's skies blazed with the arrival of the Void Dancers' main fleet. Thousands of crystalline ships emerged from hyperspace, their forms distorting reality around them. But this time, humanity didn't hide. Director Isamu Khan stood on the restored command deck of New Eden, watching the tactical displays with steady eyes. The transformed forces had spent years preparing for this moment, spreading their evolution across the surviving human populations, reclaiming colony after colony. All defense grids are active, Rin reported, her iridescent form shifting with barely contained energy. The resonance barriers are holding. Around the planet, massive generators pulsed with the combined power of thousands of transformed humans, creating a shield that matched the Dancers' own crystalline frequencies. Colonel Victor Rostov's voice echoed through the neural network connecting all transformed soldiers. Remember your training. Remember what we are fighting for. Humanity doesn't just survive today. We take back our future. The Void Dancers struck first, their ships releasing waves of crystalline energy that could have transformed entire continents. But as the waves hit the resonance barriers, something unprecedented happened. The energy didn't just stop. It was absorbed, redirected, transformed. Dr. Tanaka, monitoring from her laboratory deep within New Eden, laughed in triumph. The final evolution is complete. Our molecular structure can now perfectly counter theirs. We're no longer just resistant. We're their natural opposite. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human history. The transformed defenders took to space in ships of their own design, vessels that shifted and flowed like living mercury. Where Void Dancer crystal met transformed human matter, reality itself seemed to shudder and reshape. Lieutenant Santos led the first counterattack, her squadron diving through the Dancer fleet like silver lightning. Their ships are vulnerable at the structural nodes, she broadcast. Hit them there. Their crystalline matrix can't compensate fast enough. The Dancers, facing defeat for the first time in their ancient history, changed tactics. Their ships began to merge, forming a vast crystalline web that threatened to engulf the planet. But humanity had anticipated this. Now, Victor commanded, across Earth's surface, massive restoration arrays activated. The combined power of millions of transformed humans surged through the devices, creating a wave of anti-crystalline energy that rippled out into space. The effect was catastrophic for the Dancers. Their crystalline forms began to break down, unable to maintain coherence against the focused will of an entire transformed species. Ship after ship shattered, their fragments dissolving into harmless stardust. In the chaos, Rin led a strike team directly into the heart of the Dancer command ship. What they found there changed everything. At the core of the vessel, they discovered the truth about their enemy. The Void Dancers were themselves refugees, fleeing from a universe that was becoming hostile to their crystalline nature. They weren't trying to destroy us, Rin reported back, her voice filled with wonder. They were trying to transform us because they believed it was the only way life could survive in a changing cosmos. The final moments of the battle became not a fight for destruction, but a desperate race for understanding. Dr. Tanaka, working with the knowledge gained from the Dancer ship, made a breakthrough that would reshape both species' futures. Our transformation isn't just an evolution. It's a bridge, she explained to the War Council. We've become living proof that organic and crystalline life can coexist, adapt, and thrive together. The war ended not with the annihilation of either side, but with a transformation more profound than either species had imagined. The remaining Void Dancers, recognizing the potential of what humanity had become, laid down their weapons. Together, they began the work of restoration, not just of Earth and its colonies, but of the very fabric of space-time that both species called home. Years later, standing in a garden where crystal trees grew alongside organic ones, Director Khan watched transformed children playing with young dancers, their forms shifting and flowing together in impossible patterns. We lost our world, he mused, but we found something greater, a new way of being, a new definition of what it means to be human. The legacy of Project Chrysalis had done more than save humanity. It had elevated them. The sleeping warriors of New Eden had awakened to become not just survivors or soldiers, but pioneers of a new age where transformation itself was the key to survival. As the three moons rose over the restored city, their light playing off the harmonious blend of crystal and organic structures, Rin smiled at the future they had built. The Void Dancers had tried to remake humanity in their image, but humanity had remade itself into something entirely new, a bridge between worlds, a promise of endless possibility. The dawn of reclamation had become the dawn of transcendence, and the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter with the promise of what was yet to come.